Good morning, everyone. My name is Keely Winton. I'm the Executive Director for Strong Hearted Native Women's Coalition, and I'll be facilitating our men's panel today, Bringing Back the Warrior. Just a couple housekeepings. Our panel on the right-hand side will allow you to enter some questions into the chat box, and when we respond to the question on chat, then everyone can see it. The chat box that is available usually is only going to allow you to send a chat to one of the presenters. So that may not work like Zoom works, where everyone can chat and see that, just so that you guys know. So the best thing to send is in the question section, and we'll get that question answered either during the discussion or at the end of the discussion. And then also we want to let everyone know that this session is being recorded. You will have a chance to ask questions at the end of the session to the panelists. We will unmute people so that you can ask questions in person or just use the question box. We will also take the opportunity to stop the recording so that you may ask a question of the panelists without it being recorded, if that's something that you're more comfortable with. So that's just some quick housekeeping. The other piece that I wanted to point out is that this program is sponsored by the Department of Justice Office Against Violence Against Women. The opinions and information that is shared today is the opinion and information by each presenter and speaker, and not the opinion of the Office of or Department of Justice Office Against Violence. So again, just a quick disclaimer for all of you. I do also have my information up and available for you if you have questions or concerns regarding this discussion. This is going to be a very sensitive topic. We are going to talk about abusers or those who cause harm. We are going to talk about, sorry, didn't mean to throw that in there. We are going to talk about, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. We're going to talk about victimization a little bit, and so we just want to say that if anyone is, concerned, or again, this is a sensitive conversation, just be warned that we are going to be discussing some issues regarding accountability and bringing abusers back into the circle. So that can be sensitive for some of our victims out there, and we just want to recognize that ahead of time. And you're welcome to call or talk to me afterwards. You're welcome to call and talk to me or text, email me if you have questions or concerns. So again, to get started, we asked one of our panelists, Dean Hoaglin, is going to say a prayer for us before we get started.
Oh, thank you, Keely. And I just want to say, we thank you again, Yakaapare. Kimasa Hile Kasutsu Mehik. We Kodi Weya, Grandfather. I thank you again for this life today. I thank you for allowing us to come together in this way and to share, Grandfather. And I ask for your guidance, for your blessing. Show us what we need to see, Grandfather. Allow us to hear what we need, Grandfather, for our healing, for our recovery, Grandfather, for us to be in a good way, Grandfather. Just bless all those things, all our spaces, Grandfather. Keep our people safe, Grandfather. We ask for special prayers for our relatives that are suffering from this virus, Grandfather, in all our communities. Again, from the different challenges, Grandfather, the violence, the abuse, the trauma. And now, Grandfather, there's other things going on, the imbalance of our world, of our earth, Grandfather. We ask for healing for our Mother Earth. Again, with the fires, and everything, Grandfather. Just so thankful again for, our traditional keepers, our ancestors, Grandfather, for these ways, these medicine ways that can help us, Grandfather. So ask for your guidance. I ask for your pity, Grandfather, to be with us during this time again, so we can come up with some solutions, Grandfather, how to make our communities healthier, Grandfather, how to, again, to heal and for all of our relatives like that in the best way, Grandfather. So Yahweh Kodi Wea. Oh. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. So a little bit about myself. I just wanted to point out that I am an advocate of domestic violence and sexual assault. I've been doing this work for 20 years now. And to give a little bit of background regarding this discussion, about a year ago, Strong-Hearted, we hosted a statewide domestic violence and sexual assault conference, and we had some of the gentlemen here today. We have a couple new faces to the panel, and we started this discussion a year ago, and so we want to keep this discussion going. We also had a men's forum to continue the discussion in our area as well. So this has been an ongoing conversation, not only in here in California, but in other tribal areas throughout the country on how do we do a better job working with our men who support not only the violence against women, but abuse in general. So that's just a quick little blurb about where we are and kind of where we've come from this point. So without further ado, I'd like to have the panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about your work. So Dean, if you want to go ahead and get us started off.
Sure, okay. Thank you, Keely. Again, relatives, good morning. My name is Dean Hoaglin, and my tribal heritage, again, from the area which I speak from, is Coast Miwok in Marin County, Pomo in Lake County, and Yuki Wailaki in Mendocino. And even though I'm based in Sonoma County, but this is known as Pomo country. I'm a traditionalist, and I'm a dancer and singer of roundhouse ways, and I think that culture plays a big part, in the work that I do. Those values, those principles, and those things that help us, bring sense and understanding to how we're supposed to live. And so I really believe in culture as far as helping, with the issues around, violence and prevention, and overall recovery. My current position is with Sonoma County Indian Health Project as a community outreach specialist. And that means a lot of things as far as, tribal engagement, community engagement in doing wellness and prevention work, and addressing these tough issues too, such as sexual abuse, such as, violence and, towards, women, our children even, and so, it's not the position to be in, but it's necessary, and I take it, I take responsibility for it. I always say that, I'm accountable, to my people, and so, how can I help, with, this issue around, reducing violence in our communities. So, and previous to my position, such as Keely, I was a domestic violence advocate for Intertribal Council for several years, and working, within statewide program, so we helped, with communities throughout, California, and did a lot of, direct services, assisted, victims, DV, and worked with families, to help them, be put in a safe environment, and so they have a chance to recover. Most of my work has been in social services with our Native communities throughout our region, and again, with a lot of different, I guess you can call modalities of treatment, and so wellness and prevention have been, kind of like my, I guess, what I gravitated towards, what I've been, had the honor and, the opportunity, a creator guided me to do this work. And, I really, I'm thankful for it, that, hopefully I can make an impact, a positive impact on the people that I serve, because like I stated in the last time we were here, doing a men's forum, was that, when I work with an individual, it's not just I'm healing or help healing, my relative, that one individual, but we're healing generations of men. We're healing generations of communities. And I really believe this. So that's me, that's who I am. And I'm honored and appreciate, to be with my brothers here today and my sisters too. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you. Rain?
My name is Rain McNeill. I'm a clinical social worker and the Domestic Violence Prevention Initiative Project Coordinator for the California Rural Indian Health Board. I've been with the board 3 years now, throughout the current grant we have. Originally from the mountains of North Carolina, traced my heritage to the Eastern Band of Cherokee. I have been in social work my whole career. Once I left the military, I'm a military veteran, wartime veteran. So I've been a social worker in social services, mainly in child welfare for almost 20 years, on and off with substance abuse and some other modalities, as Dean said, thrown in. And so my work has always been around social services and advocacy. And so I'm just honored to be among these men who do this every day and who fight the good fight to make space for these conversations that need to be had. So thank you, Keely, for allowing me to be a part of this again. And to the guys, I'm honored to be sitting next to you, and I appreciate the chance to lend a voice.
Thank you, Rain. Timothy?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Timothy Ruise. I'm from the Kuya Band of Indians. Little history, I used to work with the Abelica program and the Rainbow Truth Circle, creating safe spaces for LGBTQ and Two-Spirits. I'm now with the Shinwick Project, working on domestic violence, sexual assaults, as well. I'm the Victim Services Liaison here. I've only been in the work for about almost 3 years now, still new, learning. It's an honor to be here with you all, and I hope to learn some new things today from you all, as well as sharing some more with you guys as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. James, how are you doing?
Miriam Palobam Ethni, Natong James Trujillo, non La Jolla. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is James Trujillo, and I'm from La Jolla Indian Reservation. I'm the office manager and the cultural advisor for the Avelica program here on the La Jolla Indian Reservation. Avelica program is our domestic violence sexual assault awareness program that was started here on our reservation back in about 2009 to address domestic violence here in La Jolla. We're located in Southern California, and it's an honor to be here, an honor to work beside the men that are on this panel, and with you, Keely. You do great work in our area and throughout California, and it's an honor to be here and just to share ideas and just I think it's important. It's important, creating that space and honoring that space that we have here today, and with Dean opening it up with some good words there, and prayers to our Creator. Thank you for allowing us to be here and have this space.
Oh.
Thank you. Mike, how are you?
That was good. All right, sorry, everybody. My name is Mike Duncan. I am an enrolled member of the Round Valley Indian Tribes here in Northern California. I was raised mostly in Sacramento, but now I am the executive director of Native Dads Network. We're based out of Sacramento, California. And so a lot of our work is there, and we do a lot of work inside the tribal communities here in Northern California. We started doing a lot of the Fatherhood is Sacred curriculum in different communities, and I started traveling around doing that. And then while doing that, we started realizing with the family unit that DV was really high, unhealthy dysfunction, alcoholism, addiction, abuse, sexual abuse, everything was running rapid in our communities. And so we started branching out and doing different things of healthy relationships, communication skills, historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, workshops for our community, and then with the emphasis of healing within all our workshops. And so, it's one of those things, that being part of this panel last year in Tachi, it triggered, and actually last couple of years, we've been really doing some real work. I'm working with Native Wellness Institute with Gene Taglivon, and him, it's like Men Choosing Respect. Then also with you guys, Healy, and about this about having a men's panel. These things are really effective, when we're working with our men, and it's really brought some, insight from even for myself. Looking at even some of the behaviors of myself and going, man, there's just things that we have to work on as men, and not only trying to be a leader and doing workshops, but saying I'm going to be an example of how to, respect women, recognize my own flaws, and be able to teach that to our community members, And so these are just things that, some of the things are just ingrained in us, just through the years of toxic masculinity, and I'm starting to recognize certain things, and so I'm able to work with different people. I think that's the best for me. That's the best way for me to work with men in our communities is by example. And so when I share about myself or share things that I'm working on, it gives other men the permission to go, that's maybe something I need to work on. We've been operating since Native Dads Network. We've been operating since 2012 is when we really started getting the ball rolling. In 2014, we became a 501c3, and like I said, I've had the privilege to travel throughout the country as well along to the state to do different programming. So I'm honored to be on this panel here a little bit, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Tim.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Tim Stevens-Welsh. I'm 36 years old, and I'm a member from the Calaver Indian tribes, specifically Mojave, located in Parker, Arizona. A little bit of background about me and my community is I'm a co-founder and an original member of a bird singing group in Parker called Us Just Mob, and was also a vital part of the big event that they call Megaton now. So pretty much I like to partake and promote culture and tradition in my community. I've also worked with the Mojave Indian tribes in their cultural preservation department. My legal insight is I worked for the tribal court as a senior judicial clerk, where it sparked, a change in the restraining order process, what I talked about before, and this sparked, ignited in me to become an advocate as well. So I decided to quit my job as a senior judicial clerk to become a legal advocate in the tribal court. And I've been doing this for about 9 years as an advocate, where I sit in on legal proceedings such as criminal, civil, and juvenile. I give back and I promote the well-being and safety of all of my tribe members through this process. So I do, right now, I'm currently involved with the 7G Foundation, which is a nonprofit, and it dedicates itself to become a resource to Native youth throughout Native America, and gives opportunity for the younger people to showcase their athletics along with academics. And I've been volunteering with the Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition for about 2 years now, and I strongly, promote and support them and their message that the services it provides that's greatly needed in many of our communities. And I love the way that it creates awareness about our communities and to others beyond. And it's something that's greatly, greatly needed. And I am blessed and thankful to be here on this panel with you guys. So I'm really happy that these topics are coming up and we get actually able to talk about them. So again, thank you guys, and it's great to be here with you guys.
Thank you all. Thank you, brothers. I'm so honored and thankful for you guys all being here today and joining this conversation. So to get us started, we just want to first talk about all of you as healthy men and supporting violence against women and also victimization. Can you tell us a little bit just about your experience in the movement, and also, you know, how has it been working with all of us women in this space? I know it's been kind of a struggle, I think, sometimes for us as women to say, you know, where are our men? It seems like all of our women show up and it's very few men. And so that's kind of been our struggle, but have we done a good job of, you know, creating that space for you guys to come forward and us to support each other on that? And so I'll ask James if you could start us off in the discussion on this one, please.
I think probably the most important thing for creating that space for the men is acknowledging, I think, that, you know, our brothers are victims too. You know, it's not just women that are abused. You know, our men are abused, and creating that space where it's not looked at as a weakness to go to these programs. You know, that it's hard for us sometimes as men to ask for help because we're looked at in our communities as those you know, those the masculine, the ones that are supposed to go out and do the work and take care of the families and do that stuff. So for us to admit that, you know, there's things that have happened to us that, you know, and for us to reach out and ask for help, it's kind of hard sometimes. So I think creating that space where you acknowledge that you know, domestic violence does exist with our men, and it's not Indian love. It's not, you know, that it's not that we're weak because, you know, we may have gotten smacked or slapped or anything like that and asked for help. That's not part of our culture. That's not part of our tradition. And you know, being here at Avelica and in the beginning when we started the program here back in 2009, it was jokingly but not jokingly referred to as the women here, that it was the man haters club. And, you know, so it caused a lot of our men to be self-conscious about coming down for help or to even become part of the program. So one of the things that helped us a lot was going through and, you know, grassroots type thing, going and creating events for the community. And that was the way that the men were able to get involved and get involved in our program, was by helping, you know. So acknowledging that when the men come out to maybe set up the grease pole for your gathering, you know, that's participating in your program. Acknowledging that when they come out to sing for an event, that's participating in your program, because, you know, they don't have to do those things. They do those things because that's who they are. And acknowledging that, I think, is important. That, you know, participating in our programs isn't just coming to a meeting and sitting around and sharing ideas. It's helping out in the ways that we've learned from the time when we were young on how to help. And you know, so acknowledging those things, I think, is important, and doing the work here with Avelica, it's those little things that create that space, you know, where we acknowledge one another and participate. So, you know, you might not have a guy that comes in and is like, you know, domestic violence is wrong. Don't lay hands on your woman or your partner, you know, your husband, your boyfriend, whatever it is, you know, that it's wrong. But you might have a guy that might just come and be like, hey, you need help? I want to rake up the front of your guys' trailer or the front of your building, or I want to plant some plants out here so your building looks good. You know, those are things that are participating, and acknowledging those things and acknowledging those men when they do those things is, and sometimes we take those little things for granted, but you know, it's I remember years ago the late Jack when he was first starting doing this work in Rincon Reservation through the clinic, and Jack Laird, sorry I forgot to say his last name. We are working on a men's panel like this to acknowledge that, you know, our men are victims sometimes, and you know, it was met with a little bit of resistance because I think our women think this is their movement, and for the most part, it is their movement, you know, and the things that they've done, their lifestyle, creating change, and now it's time to bring the men along so that way we can stand up and help and stand side by side. You know, I think it's important.
Anyone else want to just jump in?
Yeah, I'll go. It's kind of piggybacking off what James said. We started this program. I started this program well before Native Dads came around. I was asked to do a work for Shingle Springs Tribal TANF. They hired me as a fatherhood coordinator. Prior to that, I never even heard of a program, right? And so this is back in 2009 or 2008 or somewhere around there. And just to give a brief history about my own self, and this is the reason why I started this. That I'm a person coming out of addiction at the time, incarceration for most part of my life. About 15 to 16 years in and out of the prison system, and then trying to like bring back my life and trying to take care of my kids. My kids were in the system, and I didn't really realize. I didn't understand, at that point, because of just some things become normal, you know what I mean, and of like what a father was, or even a parent, or even a person inside a relationship. And so, when I rebuilt my life and kind of things just fell into place. I went back to school, got clean and sober. These things started happening, and going out into the city and going, well, looking for a men's shelter, because we were homeless for a little while, and they would put us in these sleazy hotels and different things because there was no men programs. I realized that there is like, this is something that, man, if I ever get a chance or opportunity, I'm going to try to help men in that way. And so get into, and so starting this program, and they were asking me to start this fatherhood program. And at this tribal TANF, I go, man, I have no idea what this is. It was kind of one of those blessings in disguise. I was like, I don't even know how to do this, but I took a chance and I tried to run a program or start a program. And I realized there was a big need, and there's some space. And I know this because I've been working with men throughout California, mostly, throughout the United States, but mostly in California that, in Northern California that, we have a long way to go. I mean, this is, this question is, it's like, there's no simple answer to this, because I'll have a men's program and the men will show, or also something I'm talking about domestic violence or healthy relationships or, other things. And I know this from experience, right? From my own personal experience, it's like the ones that we know that should be there don't show up. Like this is designed for you guys. The ones that are doing the abuse, or doing the hurting, or they don't show up. It's the ones that are already on that path, they're working on themselves, they show up. And so it's it's very, this is what I've learned in the years, is that it's very, it's difficult to get them there, but it's about building the relationship inside your community, right? I try to stay away from the idea of like programming, so like the clinical thought process, because this is important just for our future generations. You know what I mean? Like, this is your responsibility as a father, as a man, as you have daughters, you have sons. We have to create something better for our people. You know what I mean? This is your responsibility. And so, and I think just with that approach, sometimes, just staying away from some language, it helps men to come in saying, okay, this is something that I want to be part of. because it's different. You know what I mean? This is, like I said, this is my approach. You know what I mean? And it's something I've learned, because I know that when I heard some things, oh, a lot of times in tribal communities, because I work in many different ones, they go, oh, this is just another program. And then you talk about topics that are going to be, you bring up topics that aren't going to be like, so I guess how you say, I don't say, like maybe pan-Indian, you know what I mean? These are, we're, you know, talking about, you know, basically like DV. We need to talk about domestic violence and how healthy relationships are important, right? We need to talk about sexual abuse. We need to talk about your own abuse, your own traumas, and try to remove some of the stigma away from help, right? You don't have to do it on your own. You know what I mean? That's traditionally, when we look at traditions, our people did go have help. We had people that went to that medicine man or person that was in your community that could help you and bless you or smudge you or have ceremony or doctoring ceremonies. I mean, there were things that you always needed help. We're people that always ask for help. You know, not only from you know, somebody like that, from the Creator. You know, and so how do we get back to that? You know what I mean? That's our responsibility. How do we teach this back to their future generations? You know, how do we teach? What do we teach them? Because they're going to have the same problems that we have now today. This is not going away anytime soon, not in my lifetime. But what we're trying to do is, like, you know, looking at future generations. Like, we have to give our young boys and our young women something better than what we have, right? And so, you know, it ain't just our responsibility in the circle, and that's why I always try to push on the guys or the communities I go to. Like, this is all our responsibilities to try to heal. You know what I mean? And I found some success doing that. You know, because it's a slow, tedious process. You know, and I'm thankful. That's why I'm thankful for these kind of panels or being invited to a panel, because like I'll just share this, because with my own history, and I share this not like I'm proud or anything like that. I'm a former abuser. I was an abuser because when I started being educated and I started understanding what abuse was, I started learning about emotional abuse. I started learning about financial abuse. I started learning about verbal abuse. You know what I mean? And I said, oh crap, I've done those things. I've done those things. Now that I'm learning about toxic masculinity, or I'm like, God, I've done some of those things in the past because I was taught those things by my relatives, by our community members. I need to work on those things. I have to say that out loud because I'm not perfect. I'm not even, you know, I'm just somebody that was caught into something, that was taught something, believed it, and now I want to change it because now I know it's not okay. I know it's not okay. You know what I mean? And I have to say that. You know what I mean? And so when I understand, you know, we look at, some people call themselves traditional, then we have to look at then what our communities were made up of. You know what I mean? That, you know, a lot of our communities were matriarchal societies. That means our women were had leadership positions. They had an understanding, a connection to things, right? That men don't have, and we need to respect those things. So where do we learn again? We talk about toxic masculinity, or toxic, or just the male dominant. Again, it really came from the boarding schools and the churches. So we start to understand where did like the historical, the piece, where did this come from? Our communities were healthy at one time. Where did it all change? Right? Where did we come with this type of thinking? Where did we come with this type of belief system? Right? And so then for me, I try to lay that foundation of understanding, like, hey, it wasn't like this at one time. Our people were healthy or strong. We thrived for thousands of years before contact. Thousands of years. Then all of a sudden, things changed. Right? How do we change it back? What's our responsibility? If we're considering ourselves, what's our definition of a Native man, as an Indian man? What is our definition? You know, because if we're going back to saying this is what we want as a community, and then we start to make that a belief system, we could go from a different belief system, from Native tradition belief system from American. You know, I don't even consider myself American because I don't believe in the belief system of American belief system. how they treat women, how they sexualize women. Like that's the American belief system, how they treat their elders, you know, and how they treat, you know, their own people. That's not even what native culture is totally different. It's conflicting. So I think what's important is, again, as men, is to really understand what's our role and what is our belief system, right? What is our belief system? What is it? Considering calling myself a Maidu, Wailaki, Wintun man, then what's our belief system as those tribes, right? What's those tribes, right? And so getting back to that, you know what I mean? And for the safety of our future generations, the safety, that's a responsibility. That's a lifestyle. That's the way that we believe in. Is we will go and standing in front of in ceremony. If we're at ceremony, if we're standing at the pole in the roundhouse or around the fire or in the nipi, wherever we're at in ceremony, are we operating under those rules of our people, right? And so I think that those are important things. You know, it's like I said, for me, you know, when I come from that place, this is where I live. This is the way I live. I see in my past and how that's like affected my family, affected our community, and I want to bring this other goodness to our community. That's when I feel like I get the most progress with the men. And I would probably went a whole different direction, and I'm sorry, I do that from time to time, but I'll just pass it that way. Thank you. Let me share.
Anyone else want to comment?
I think I'll go, if that's okay with everyone. So I'm gonna play devil's advocate again a little bit with Keely, because the question is, what can we as women do to make more space for men? And that basically feeds into the idea that this is a women's movement. When we talk about violence, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, we often leave it to the women. It's something they deal with. I do trainings throughout the United States, throughout the state of California. I did one last year, domestic violence. There's a problem on tribal lands in this particular community with domestic violence. We set up the training. 75 members of the community showed up, all women. Not a single man showed up to the event. Actually, I take that back. The chairman showed up. He gave a speech. He said good afternoon, and then he left. That was the only man from the tribe that actually showed up, the 75 people. And what it ended up being was testimonial after testimonial of the abuse that the women in the community have experienced, have gone through, and the way the tribal community sort of treated them after. How they were abused secondarily by the process of talking about the abuse, pointing the finger at the abusers. And so I think we as men, we have to stop waiting for the invitation. We have to make our own spaces around this issue. As long as we wait for people like Keely to invite us to do a men's panel, it's always going to be a women's conversation that we're invited to, instead of us men, Native men, having our own conversations around this issue and taking the leadership role. And then we talk about the abusers and how the community supports that. How do we, you know, I do a lot of these trainings, and it's always a constant sort of back and forth. Well, how do we reintroduce them to the community? Or how do we protect the victims? And at what point, and again, this is me playing the devil's advocate here, at what point do we say the abuse is so severe, this person shouldn't be in our community? This person has targeted, say, our gay community or our LGBTQ and two-spirit community viciously, and, you know, under the sort of protection of the community not talking about it, the men allowing it to happen. And so after repeated victims, repeated instances, at what point do we say this person just does not belong in our community? And that's something I think we don't ask a lot of times, is at what point is enough with some of these abusers? I often see communities where an abuser will be protected by silence, by men not saying anything, but the gay or LGBT community in that same community is being relentlessly targeted and abused overtly. So We allow this to happen on one stage as men, and then on the other stage we kind of turn a blind eye to the other abuse that's going on. And so we as men I feel just have to take a stronger leadership role. And then how do our communities handle these situations? Like I said, at what point is the abuse so much that we just don't have that conversation and we say this person is just not healthy for our community? And what does that abuse look like? Is it one woman? Is it two kids? What does that look like where we say this person is a danger to our community? This person is not healthy for our community. And so I oftentimes want to ask those questions in these spaces. And then we look at, again, most tribes struggle with, do we do it Western or do we do it traditional? When we talk about introduction, we talk about ways to prevent abuse, prevent the escalation of violence in our communities. Do we follow a Western model or do we follow a more traditional model? And so I see tribes struggle with that a lot, trying to figure out what is the best fit for them. And then also, how do you protect victims while you're reintroducing their abusers into the community? How do you do that? Even if this person has gone through every class you could have them go through, they've gone through all the steps, they've done all that. How do you protect that victim when they're walking in the grocery store and there's the abuser in their community staring at them across from a cash register? Even though this person has done all this work, you can't change what has happened to this particular member of the community. And we know that these victims, there's usually more than one. So how do we address that with our victims while we're introducing abusers into the community? At what point do we say we can't allow this to happen because this person may not be safe or feel safe? Or do we say, listen, you're going to give up some of that feeling of safety so that this person can be a member of our community? And then, you know, us as men, we're models. We have to model the behavior that we want to see in our communities. We have to model the behavior we want to see in our little boys. I always tell the story, you know, I'm married and I have two children, one boy, one girl. My son fell out of a tree in our front yard and came running over to me, immediately crying. I looked at him and said, stop crying like a little girl. I thought my wife was going to jump over the table and strangle me just to look in her eye in that split second. And I realized right then that I was one of these people who perpetuated toxic masculinity. I'm sitting here telling my son, don't be like your mom or your sister in that moment because you're showing emotion. You're showing a little bit of vulnerability. And I'm trying to parent that out of him in my own toxic masculinity. And so he gets okay and he walks off. And my wife looks at me and she says, you better never do that again. That lesson has stuck with me a long time, guys. So those are the things that I think we as men have to model. Like, and at what point do we as a community and we as men in the community say, there are certain things we're just not going to allow, or there are certain things that we are going to allow, but these are the steps you're going to have to do to become another back into the fold, to come back into our community. And how do we address that? And again, domestic violence has always been victim-centered. And so when we talk about access to services, you know, there are services out there, absolutely. But what do those services look like for me, the potential user? Are they easy to get to? Is there a stigma attached? But oftentimes we as men, we carry that burden of whatever's going on with us inside close to the vest. We're not going to go around talk to our buddies and say, man, I'm having a hard time financially. I think I need to go talk to somebody. You know, those kind of conversations are hard for us men to have with each other. And so we internalize that oftentimes. And when you're talking about something like abuse or some of these harder issues to address in our lives, a lot of times it's almost impossible for men in our communities to have those conversations and feel safe or feel comfortable. Even though the services are there, the stigma attached to going out and seeking help. Now I'm weak. Now I can't handle my own business. You know, my business is in the street because I couldn't take care of what needed to be taken care of. So we have this sort of way of thinking about things that makes it so that we internalize a lot of the trauma that we come across. And, you know, we're just talking about abuse. We're not even talking about the systemic racism, the trauma from this virus that is going on right now, how that has increased our domestic violence incredibly. The trauma of some of these children who were getting meals from school who are now trapped at home with their abusers. So there's a lot of this going on right now, and it's only gotten worse in the last 6 months. And so we as men, again, have to be the leaders. We can't sit around and wait for, strong-hearted women to give us an opportunity. We have to go out and make that opportunity. We have to go out and be the leaders in our communities and say, this is what we're going to stand for. This is what we're not going to stand for. And we have to model that to our children, our young people, our little boys especially, who see that toxic masculinity that Mike was talking about everywhere. It's everywhere for them. Magazines, everywhere on the computer, the internet, any show you watch, the strong alpha male versus the vulnerable women in the episodes, those sort of things. So we as men have to understand we're fighting against a tidal wave of influence that comes from all different directions when we're talking about masculinity and toxic masculinity. And so we have to be very careful on what we let our children be exposed to. And again, that's the leadership role that we as men take on or should take on.
Anyone else want to jump in? Thank you for all your words. You guys have great comments, and we do have a few questions, but I'll ask those in a little bit. So.
And I agree with both of them most definitely. And I was thinking in my head too, the devil's advocate perspective is greatly needed. And I'm glad that you brought it up, because we can't start to heal if we don't address those topic points, and a lot of it has to do with accountability. We as men sometimes don't hold other men accountable, and I think about it only because in my line of work, when it's restraining orders, I do have men and women, and it's usually the same dialogue. I just had one just recently where a man from my reservation was shot in the leg, and he was told, to get a restraining order. And having that conversation with him is that he had this stigma that if he gets a restraining order, he's a punk. He's not a man. But I had to put it into perspective for him is that your life is your life. And not only that, you have an example that you have to set for your own children. So if this person can come and threaten your life and possibly take you out of your life, would you, how do you think your children are going to feel? I think a lot of this has to do with dialogue and perspective that our men aren't getting, and we haven't given the opportunity to present this to our communities. And I think each reservation is different. I think for mine, offenders and perpetrators and offenders are not held accountable. And I think a lot of it stems from my leadership. It's kind of hard to hold people accountable when your vice chair is driving around with multiple DUIs and doesn't see any jail time. And I use that as an example, that when we start holding people in leadership roles accountable, and not everyone's perfect. Not everyone's perfect. And I think that's where we kind of steer our generation the wrong way. But the one thing that I do love about the younger generation is that, there is these movements that are going on, and these younger people are talking about, the things that haven't been addressed for many, many years, whether it be, uncles molesting me, cousins molesting me, aunties molesting me. And these kids are coming out and they're starting to speak. But also, too, we also have to understand, too, that there are a lot of other kids who don't have that opportunity to speak. And we have to, in order for us to truly help people, we have to create these spaces. And I agree with you, Wayne, is that we shouldn't be waiting for Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition to give us our platform. It needs to be done to where we create that space. Because only then, it's going to take men to welcome men and make them feel secure that these are things that it's okay to talk about. And let's be real, how many of us have been victims growing up, and I think that we're the very few that actually moved on from those situations, and I know for me, for myself, being a victim of abuse growing up, it sent me to my adulthood, into my actions, into my anger, and if it wasn't for, and I talk about this, I did have to go to jail, and the court had to address my anger management issue. And in my anger management courses and my therapy, it stemmed back all the way from childhood. And I was court mandated to take classes and courses for about 3 to 6 months, but since we had to go back to where the anger derived from, 6 months turned into 2 years. To now I have my therapist on speed dial because sometimes I need a tune-up, and it's that healing process. There's and you're gonna have triggers. And I tell my people, especially the people my age, is that, because we do get that stigma too, as well as that therapy and counseling is for white people, and it's not. It helps. You just have to give it the opportunity. You have to give it a chance. And I think that people don't like to give chances and better opportunities for themselves because they don't know how. There was a kid when we had our Indigenous Bowl with 7G. We were talking about dreams and opportunities, and he posed a question to us where I don't even know how to dream because I would have been living my whole life as nightmares, and that hit me to my core, to where this child hasn't had any positive influence in his life, to where a nightmare is what he's accustomed to. So he'll never be able to recognize opportunity when it gets to him. As a matter of fact, he didn't want to come to the Indigenous Bowl. His family sent him because he didn't want to. So that kind of bothered me too, is that if we don't create these spaces, it's going to keep our younger generations to expect worse and be raised in worse. So I do, thank you guys for being that voice, amongst our communities. All positive role models, and I think that's something that's greatly, greatly needed. Thank you for sharing for that.
Thanks, Tim. So a lot of you guys have talked about, touched a little bit about accountability and creating space. And I know several of you in your work, you have, places for healing men. So not just, men who abuse, but also for victims and their healing. Can you talk a little bit about some of your work and what do you do to help with, trying to find a place for abusers to heal, but also not jeopardizing our communities or jeopardizing victims? A little bit about what Rain had touched on. Dean, can you start us off on that? And
Sure. What I think is important with that and doing that work, Keely, is and everyone is again creating that safe environment, right? Where the perpetrators, who are victims themselves, as we come to find out, because a lot of the work that we do is addressing kind of like what we call, and identify as adverse childhood effect, that trauma that that a lot of our men have experienced. So I think it's important for us to again be conscious, be aware of how do we create that space. It has to be a place that's I want to say like secluded but away from, and that is specific for those men that we work with. And we do that a lot of times. We'll take them, we'll take our men, like when we have our gatherings, it's in a area where they can actually do the work, and feel like, it's their space, and that, give them that opportunity to really address, what are the issues that, have brought them there. And also, one of the things that, was mentioned is so important is how do we and the need for, and how do we address the stigma that goes along with, being labeled as a, as a perpetrator, right? And there's a lot of shame that goes with that, a lot of shame, and I think really fear too, because the men, they don't know how to, begin, how do I begin to like really even acknowledge it, and so that's why that space needs to be, where it can support them, beginning that journey, beginning that work, and a lot of times we'll take them to, our arbors, our areas, like we have an area here at Yakima where we do a lot of our wellness, our men's gatherings, and where it's a safe and, place just for the men to, and to be vulnerable, and that's one of the things, I think some of you maybe have mentioned, some of the brothers have mentioned as far as, our men, we need to be accountable. We need to be vulnerable though, because, again, getting away from that whole idea around, masculinity, right? The machismo, and, that it's okay. It's okay to have, that, and to have that, I guess, connection with, what I'm feeling, because that's a part of, again, as a part of a human being, we can't get away from that. We do have our feelings. We do have our emotions, and how does that impact us, mentally and even spiritually? So we haven't talked too much about spirituality, and I think in those spaces that we provide, that's what they're going to experience, right? And again, one of the other, I guess, ways that we address that experience is through, what we call is healing the inner child. That work, and that's so powerful, because a lot of men that come to us, they don't know what that is. They've never known how to even begin, to look at that, and young men, boys, that experience trauma, that have been victimized. What do they do in turn? They blame themselves. They become the perpetrators. They become the ones that are going to inflict pain, that are going to inflict, violence and trauma towards their own relatives, their own families. So there's a lot of work that needs to take place, and we believe that, and like I think Cousin Mike mentioned it, we've just begun this work, but I think that this is a great approach, to, again, I think it needs to be in a safe environment where it's not like, maybe even part of like a larger, organization, right? And I know that not everyone has access to that, but if you can, in your communities, take them to that place where there's, where they're out, in nature, and where they're by that water, where we can offer those traditional medicines, and have those ceremonies for them, So that's the work that we've been doing, and I think again, like brothers have been mentioning, we continue to, strive to be those role models, and because we were all, a part of, at some level, ourselves, maybe being victims or even being perpetrators. So, it's like healing together, and supporting that, I think is really how we continue in this work. So, thank you. And one last thing before I forget, things come to my mind. Because I mentioned it earlier as far as healing generations. Again, we need to start including our boys and our young men too, because they need to see who we are as men, right? As healthy men, right? It's not just saying it, but it's just, what are our actions, right? And so I think that has a great influence, again. And then at some point we're preparing, our boys and our young men and to, again, begin those healthy relationships with, with our young ladies, and our women, and that's only before, again, I think there needs to be a sense of, accountability and commitment too, from each person, right? I can't tell you what to do, but I can offer some suggestions, some guidance, and some, it's up to each individual. What are they willing to commit to, right? In being accountable, and I think that it needs to be kind of like that whole idea around like a village, right? Supporting and encouraging and providing those spaces for our men. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? What about so when you talk about programs and services for men and working on our community, what does it look like for really our male victims? A lot of our programs in domestic violence, a lot of our language is out there for women, that we assist women and we have a women's shelter, but our programs are meant for male victims as well. And so I think some of that language that we have kind of off, puts male victims off from actually reaching out to help some of our services. And I know for me personally, I've gotten calls from men just wanting to know that they're not crazy. So could you guys speak a little bit more to, do you feel like the programs that we have in place are useful to male victims? Do we need to look at other types of resources for male victims versus what we offer for our women? Go ahead. Mike, do you want to start us off?
Yes. Yeah, I think something I mentioned earlier that, because there's not many programs or things that address that, and there's a stigma attached to it. I just want to mention too, one thing that we have to remember too, all Native people have been affected by trauma. There is not one Native. If you're Native and you claim to be Native or whatever, your history comes from trauma, just based on the historical piece, right? And it's intergenerational. And sometimes we carry these things and don't even realize it's, even it's affecting our lives, or it's impacting our lives in that way. Hurt people. And a lot of times, because something that Rain talked about earlier, as men, we tell other men to like man up, and I always, like I said, we have to question our philosophy. Where did that philosophy come from? Well, I'll tell you where it came from. It comes from America, because that whole European thought process. We are, one of the things we have to get back to, for us, as men, is to understand that healing is part of our culture, is part of who we are. Getting men together, I mean, really, it's hard. It's hard because I literally do the work weekly. Sometimes I'll have large groups, and we'll do different curriculums. Like I said, we do a lot of Native American Fathers Family Association curriculums. So we'll do the Fatherhood is Sacred. When that was just men, it was just Fatherhood is Sacred. We have a large amount of men. When we started combining fatherhood and motherhood together, it's because, again, people that were in relationships, the wives are being mistrusting of the men because of whatever situation they're, maybe the man created in the past, of maybe cheating or whatever. Our numbers of men started decreasing, and our women groups are increasing, the members of our group. And so having like I'm gonna go back, maybe just back to a little bit as far as having a safe place, that creating that for men is having their own, having their space where they can, feel safe to share, about their traumas, and it takes time, it takes time. It takes somebody that, I guess as a facilitator or as a person that leads those groups, it takes them time to kind of just sit back with them. And then, it's so crazy because we could be in it's really easy to go to a place of judgment when somebody talks about abuse, or maybe they've been, like I said, hurt people. So maybe they had incident of domestic violence, but you know, they witnessed that the whole time they were growing up. They watched their fathers doing it, their grandfathers doing it, their uncles doing it, you know. And now we're saying, hey, it's not okay. And but I'm already, you know, the man or the person's already like, man, that's all I've seen my whole life. You know what I mean? Maybe not even physically, verbally, or even like again, like you know, womanizing. You know what I mean? We've seen that all our uncles, you know, all they do is womanize. All our cousins womanize. You know, and we start to believe those things are okay. You know what I mean? And so now we're going to a group sometimes, and men don't want to hear those things sometimes. It's hard, you know, because our ego sometimes, or our pride, or you know, here, who are you to tell me kind of mentality comes into play, you know. And what impacts people, or I guess when I look at it, what impacts our children, I mean, it impacts our men when we start talking about our children, you know. I work with men coming out of prison directly, and how I get to every man coming out of prison. You start talking about their kids. They fold like lawn chairs. They start crying. They start, you know, confessing their feeling. They love their children and these things, and then that's when the healing begins. You know, they start to tell, well, maybe I was molested as a child, you know, or I was abused as a child, and then you start to go, man, all this starts to make sense now, you know. But that's one thing that we have to, I mean, just get back to what you're saying, is that creating a space, but it's also understanding that this is why is this so common inside our communities. Because I've been in a whole bunch of different reservations and doing this work, and all the problems are the same, you know. Why? Well, we know why. I mean, this is like, yeah, this is like, I'm probably preaching to the choir, right? Well, the historical trauma piece. And a lot of times, because we've been hurt, you know, we go right away, we go, oh, that man's no good. And so, you know, it is like, you know, I'll tell you what, like, so for example, I've worked with men and I had no idea about their past. You know, when I first started the fatherhood program, I started working in Sacramento. It's an urban center. So a lot of people come in from a lot of different tribes. Well, I started creating and I had this group. Of course, you know, we're having, we do a lot of volunteer work in our communities. We do different activities in our communities, and I take pictures. I put it in our fatherhood page. Well, the survivor or the victim of the man that maybe he abused sees us all hugged up, you know, while waving at the camera, you know, hey, you know, that, you know, because we're at this event, or we're doing something in fatherhood, or we're doing something that together as they try to get well, you know, like this wellness piece that we're doing. And the woman will call me up and say that, you know, hey, why are you working with that guy? You know what he did to me? You know what he did to my family? You know what he did to my children? And then now she's saying negative things about me, saying negative things about my program, and say that, you know, this is what Mike works with, this is what he's doing, you know what I mean? And my thought was, and I talked back when I responded to her, I said, you know, what are our choices? You know, we tell this man to get away, we shoo him away into and where he goes to another community, and he goes to another community, does the same exact thing, without the help, without the support. You know what I mean? And it's been hard because, you know, then, you know, sometimes, you know, my own I guess she's judgment comes in, where I start to prejudge, like, man, this guy, look at what he did to this woman. So, do I really want to help him? You know, it makes me upset. You know, it makes us, you know, I don't want him I don't want him even around me. But, you know, we have to do our part, and it's hard. And this whole thing is very hard. You know, it's not a simple, like I said, simple showing up, and these guys are just, you know, all going in, you know, full force. You know. But it's so I think it's just time. I think it takes time. It takes the ability of a facilitator or a person that's in the community to kind of just come from a place of understanding. It takes for women to also have that place of understanding. This is part of the process of us healing. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to come up, and that there's support and therapy and groups that are going to be supporting the whole family, because this is not just a men's problem. This is a community problem, like protecting abusers, the code of silence, There's this whole thing of, you know, because how many times have I addressed the abuse in our communities on social media, and a gang load of women just come at me and just start threatening me? You know what I mean? This is a community problem. And when certain men try to address these things, it happens. But you know, I think this is something that I'm proud of all these guys that are here, because this is something that as I feel like this is my role. This is something that, you know, Creator, you know, said to me, you know, that, you know, you can handle it. It's okay. Just come from a place of understanding. Some of these things have to be addressed. They have to be talked about. Spaces have to be created. You know, things have to be talked about. You know, and then the boost for men. You know, I mean, like you said, go back to what the topic was about. These things we have to erase some of the stigma. How do we get to a place of healing? Right. It is about addressing the youth and talking about these things at a young age and saying these things are not okay. No man, no woman should touch you sexually or physically in that way. You know, we needed to, so we can start this. So when somebody comes my age, they already know this becomes normal conversation. This becomes normal conversation. It's no longer, it's like I'm telling you, some, like, and you guys know this, in some communities, it is normal to see DV. It is normal for sexual abuse. It's normal for rape. You know, it is normal. Like, it's just silence. You know what I mean? It's just, no one talks about it, but everybody hears about it and knows about it. You know, so I think we're on the right track. I just think, you know, these conversations, we're still scratching surfaces, you know, and I appreciate, I know that it doesn't take all of us to kind of be together and have these kind of like a united way of vision, you know, united way of thinking, saying this is what we need to do to create these things for our men, so they can come to it, they can feel safe, so they can talk about their healing, talk about their pain. You know, like I said, hurt people. So it's like how, like, you know, I'd say, for example, I'll give the last one and I'll shut up. Like, there was a grandfather in one of the communities that I worked in that molested his children. You know, and then so these boys, these young boys, there are 3 boys that they grew up to be men, but they started doing the molestation. Well, 2 of them already been arrested recently. And I was actually friends with them. I sat with them in the roundhouse ceremonies and different things. And then when these allegations came up, you know, and then they were arrested at this allegation. And then I found out that these things been going on prior. And then so I was interested. I was curious. So I went to go see one of them, and I was actually okay with one of the, I mean, real good friends with one of the guys. And I asked him straight up, and you know, he started crying to me. And telling me, you know, he was apologizing that, you know, he felt like he let me down, lied to me, and then he also talked about, you know, how those things happened to him when he was a child, and you know, it just gave me a deeper level of understanding. It gave me a deeper level of understanding. These people just hurt, and they were shown something, like anything else, like some of his learned behavior. And to that time, no one said nothing to him. It just in that community. Now, whose fault is that? Is it the men? Is it the women that stay silent? Is it the elders in that community? I mean, where do we say whose fault it is? You know what I mean? And so I say, like, so I'm saying this is a very complicated question. There's layers to it, but I think to get to a place of understanding for us, you know, as a community, as men and women, that we understand it's a community issue. And it's good to have women inviting men to the table and saying, how can we resolve this together? Because this is about all of our future, all of our children, all of our grandchildren, all of our great grandchildren, the ones that we haven't met yet. It's our responsibility to start changing things, but we first have to come from a place of understanding.
Anyone else want to jump in?
I think
I'll follow up.
oh, go ahead, Ray.
Someone else want to go? I think what Mike was saying was absolutely true. The normalization of the abuse that happens in our communities. You know, we know who the abusers are. We go to activities on tribal land and we can point them out. You know, the women know who they are. They're mad that they're there. And the men in those situations are ambivalent a lot of times. And so I think there is a normalization of the behavior. But one of the things I want to talk about is the space that we provide for men in these situations of abuse. We know that about 1 in 15 men are abused sexually. But we also know that 95% of the men who become abusers were abused themselves. We also know that 95% of that abuse happened before age 16. So what you have is during their formative years, men are abused during a shorter window. Women, we know, over their lifetime are often abused, not just as children or as preteens or as teens or young adults. It happens throughout their lifetime. For most men, by the time they're 16, that abuse has stopped, physical or sexual. And so at some point during that time, in those formative teenage years, that person, that male, has to decide, what am I going to do? And like Mike said, oftentimes they mimic the behavior. No one is born predisposed genetically or has a chromosome that says I'm going to be a rapist or I'm going to be a sexual predator or I'm going to hate gay people or I'm going to be anti-LGBTQ. That's all learned behavior. They learned that in their house. They learned that in their community. And so again, the men in those communities are responsible. The women in those communities are responsible. The parents in those communities are responsible. The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And so we have to address our young boys and know that the abuse that they're going to suffer will be early on. And then the potential for them to become abusers is going to happen 15, 16, 17 years old. So we have to really key in on those ages for them. For our women in the community, we know that they can be victims throughout their lifespan. So the approach that we offer to them when we're talking about domestic violence, sexual abuse, sexual assault looks much, much more different than the approach we use with men and our young boys. And so I think that's one of the things we have to really pay attention to is, for young boys, the potential to become the abuser after being abused. The teenage years are critical to address their social roles. What is appropriate behavior? What isn't appropriate behavior? The things that happened to you in the past are not appropriate, and this is how we have to move forward. If you don't have those conversations and address those with our young teenage boys, guess what? The behavior that they have learned, that they have had visited on them, that is what they're going to mimic as adults. And so I think we have to address, when we're talking about men and this violence scourge that we have in our communities, sexual assaults, the anti-LGBTQ, all of those things come, again, they fall at the feet of our men in the community. And how are we addressing that? And how are we doing that early on? And it doesn't start when they're teenagers. It starts with men like us checking in with those young people, volunteering to be the coach, volunteering to go on the field trips. Those are the kind of things where we as men in the community have to get more involved. We have to have those conversations. I remember growing up, my house was the house where a lot of kids from the neighborhood came and congregated. And looking back on that, I realized part of that was my father was in the home, and my father was a very strong presence in the home. And the children in the community didn't necessarily have that or were exposed to it. And so he offered something to those children who weren't his kids that they absolutely needed. And he role modeled appropriate behavior. He was very patient. He went to work every day. He did all those things you would think, this is a man. He takes care of his family. And he did that not just for me and my brother, but he did that for the other boys in our community. And he would take the time to shoot hoops. I remember coming home several times from school, and one of the kids from the neighborhood was already in my front yard shooting hoops with my dad. He would take that kind of time with young people in our community. And those are the kind of things that we have to do, whether that be in our activities on tribal lands, in our urban areas, like where Dean is. How do you address that in an urban situation versus where I work, where it's mostly rural? You know, those are going to look totally different dynamically in how you address those abusers and that abuse. But I think, like Mike said, you have to be patient and you have to kind of understand what the dynamics are at play from people who were abusers, who have now become abused, or I'm sorry, vice versa, who were abused and have become abusers, and what that looks like. And then how do we address that in the community while keeping those victims safe? And do we consciously give up their feelings of safety again to reintroduce those abusers back into our communities? And that's where I see a lot of tribes struggling with, is that conversation. How do we address reintroduction of perpetrators into our communities? And it's not just for abusers. We see the same dynamic at play around people who are, labeled drug dealers, people who bring poison into the communities and are caught and arrested and then serve their time. They come home. How do we address bringing those folks back into the communities? And our violent offenders, same thing. We see that with, not just abusers, but with people who are really, really violent, who serve their time, come back to the community. How do we reintroduce them? Do we reintroduce them? Can we have a healthy community and have people that we know are serial abusers? This person has molested not one child, but 5 children. Is that someone that we say deserves another chance to be in our community? And is it worth putting our children at risk? Now, the men on this question are going to have a totally different answer than the women on that side of the question, who have suffered this abuse for years and years, generations and generations. We literally have people in our communities who not only abuse children currently, they abuse their mothers or their fathers. So we're talking about people who are generational abusers. And so how do you break that cycle when it's so indoctrinated into some of the communities and it's normalized? Literally, like Mike said, it's normal to be raped before you're 16. It's normal to be fondled by a member of the tribe, at an activity and not talk about it. How do you change those kind of indoctrination and entrenched sort of values in some of the communities that we work with? And like Mike said also, I'm just kind of piggybacking off Mike here at this point. A lot of it is patience and, looking at the situation from different lenses. And I'm simply trying to do that here. We do these panels and we talk a lot about men, but what does that look like for the women when we talk about reintroduction of abusers and we talk about including this person in, tribal activities? And so those are the things we're just scratching the surface on.
Anybody else? Timothy? Oh, go ahead, James. Sorry.
I think with me, it was like bad things happen to me, and I've done bad things to people. As a youth, being around my reservation and stuff, and but changing those ways, and for me, it was culture. Culture brought me out of a lot of that. And it was a way for me to connect with what was in here. Because of things that happened to me when I was a child and by people that I trusted and things that we have done to each other as relatives, and reintroducing these people back into our society once they've become good relatives. Defining what that means is a whole nother discussion, but for me, it was finding the roots, with our elders that taught me from when I was younger, and going back to that and realizing and not having to come to terms with anybody else, but with myself, coming to terms with myself on who I was as a child and as a teenager, and then who I wanted to be as a man within our community. And it's a hard road, because the hardest road you'll ever come across is your own. And in the working with different people within our community, hearing their stories, and the majority of the stories that I've heard and the people that I've dealt with are all the same thing. We all have that in our background where we have some type of trauma within our upbringing, or within our community, or within our own families. And coming to terms with it myself and realizing who I wanted to be, and then setting myself with the help of others, setting myself on that path to become who I wanted to be. And without culture, without spirituality, some type of belief in a higher power, it makes it really hard. And us as native brothers and sisters, we have that instilled in us from the time we're little, from the time we come out of the womb. And it's just returning back to that space. And working here with the program and dealing with some of the guys, they won't come here. They won't come to our office. They don't want anybody else to know that they're calling, or that they're seeking out. And so it's a lot of these discussions happen, they'll call my cell phone, and luckily I've had the same number for 30 years, and I was a teenager. But they'll call and they'll reach out and they'll be like, hey, what did you mean when you were talking at the meeting about this? Or and then end up having that deeper discussion and talking to them and disclosing with them on that, just talking about what's happened to myself and my own story. And allows them, because then they feel safe, and it allows them to express. And that's the only place where healing can happen, is when we go within ourselves, within ourselves, where we're at, and what we're willing to put out and accept. So it's hard for us as men to open up and be that, like Dean said, be vulnerable. It's hard for us to do that because we're looked at the strength, the might, the worker, and so to get in touch with that other side is hard for us sometimes. So and accountability, it's an ongoing thing. It's ongoing. I know within my home, with my nieces and nephews and stuff, always having to correct the adults' language so that the kids don't talk that way. Like Rain was saying, man up. And we telling my niece, because her mom, may be telling her like, oh, you're getting kind of fat. You better slow down, look at your butt. And telling her, hey, don't, what are you doing? That's not, why would you do that? Trying to pull her by herself and tell her, like, you need to build her up for who she is, build her up and make her feel good. It doesn't matter if she's heavy or thin or what, she's your daughter. And if you start saying these things to her now, and then later on in a relationship, they start saying these things to her, she's going to think it's normal. So changing our household and the way we talk to our kids, it's a first step, I think. So it's a healing process, and it's hard. Like, it's a hard road to go down. And like I said, it's dealing with our own road first, and coming to terms within ourselves, not for anybody else to, a lot of people will judge, and a lot of people will have something to say about it, but the real journey is within ourselves. And once we become, like I shared with my cousin Timothy there before, once you get to know yourself, it doesn't matter what anybody else has to say. And getting to know yourself is a hard thing sometimes. And without guidance, guidance to and there's a difference between forced and guiding. So I think, we it's easy for us to stand up to our men and through discussions or meetings or whatever, and say, well, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't be this way. But to go and work with these individuals and guide them is a lot harder. It's a lot harder work, because like you do get the judgment, like Mike was saying, well, why are you working with this person? You know what they did, you know who they are, what they've done. People have said that about me, but it's putting that out there and really showing the community that you've changed, or that you do have a good heart, and that you come with that. And one of the things that we've done with our boys group is trying to instill in them that, what type of language should be used. And I'm one with our boys group. I don't like cussing. You know, it's one thing to talk amongst the men and you know, with each other, but you have respect for those older ones that are in the room. You know, you shouldn't be cussing when there's older people in the room. You know, there's conversations that you have, and to allow that with an older person, I think it's kind of hard. But and then the boys, by just setting that not a rule, but just setting that example, then they started holding each other accountable. You know, hey, don't talk that way. Remember, we're right here, we're in circle. You know, like you can't talk that way like that. Don't be using those kind of words. So they started holding one another accountable, because that kind of accountability became normal. You know, it became normal to them. They knew that once they walked in that door, that's what was expected. And then they started doing it when they weren't here in the office, when they were out with each other, you know, and holding one another accountable, you know, not using the word queer or, you know, fag, or saying, you know, stop acting like a little girl. Like, they started holding one another accountable for that. And you know, so it's I like what Rain said. A child who's not accepted by the community will burn it down to feel its warmth. Man, that resonated with me right there. I mean, it was like, whoa, you know, that. And I immediately started thinking about all the kids in our community, that boys and girls, that, you know, it makes it kind of all come full circle, where, you know, you see them acting out and the things that they do, and those youth will become unhealthy relatives as adults if we don't address these things with them now. So I think that's kind of the approach that we're taking, is trying to get our youth and work with them and do that. And with Rain's permission, I'd like to type this out and put it on my wall in our office. I'll put your name under it, brother.
That is not a quote. I read that somewhere, and it, like with you, it just stuck with me, and I don't know where it came from, but it has always been a quote that stuck with me. So I can't take credit for it. I stole it.
I'm gonna steal it from you.
I wanted to give Timothy a chance to share too.
So I come from two big families. My grandmother and James's grandfather are brother and sister. They were a family of 8, 1 sister, 7 boys. And then they had my grandmother and grandfather had kids. It's mostly uncles, 3 aunts, 2 aunts and my mother. And then it's a masculine family. It's a family of firefighters. My grandfather was a firefighter for 35 plus years. So that masculinity in my life was hard for me to come out as gay or LGBTQ. And as well as my dad's side, their family was, you know, even more powerful with masculinity with their women in the family. So it was hard to find those safe places to come out, which was hard for me. And like James and I have had this conversation before, you know, in the last 3 years, I've found myself more of myself than I did in the past 32 years. It came to a point where I turned 30. Before I turned 30, actually, I put myself into rehab because I was so mentally disable, or, you know, just distraught and depressed, because I couldn't be myself. I couldn't live my life the way I wanted to. And I reached out to one of our counselors at IHC here in California, or in San Diego, who put me in a all men's rehab with 49 other men. And I didn't know how comfortable that I would feel with that, because I just never related to men. I was unable to talk to men, except for my grandfather, of course, who pretty much raised me. But after losing him 10 years ago, I had nobody to go to. So this conversation of creating the safe spaces for us to go to be vulnerable and to talk once amongst each other was hard to find for me. And now with the work, I see that the progress is there. And like you guys say, we're scratching the surfaces on bringing the men back to the circle and getting them involved in the community. But that place to be vulnerable amongst one another is hard, was hard for me out here, especially because everyone knows everybody. We're such a tight-knit community with about, you know, 7, most of the reservations are here in North County, San Diego. A lot of the people that work at the clinics are related. I'm a personal person. I don't like my business being out there, and I don't like, you know, any other family members knowing that. So I think it's important that we do keep these conversations going and these groups starting to bring these men into the circle and being vulnerable to talk and express themselves without judgment, without it getting out, or, you know, or even the thought of it getting out. You know, it's opened my eyes in the last 3 years of, you know, understanding both sides, the men and women. And I think it is time that we start standing behind the women and protecting them, as well as holding ourselves accountable for what we've gone through or what we've done as perpetrators, as, you know, whatever. The code of silence, you know, that's everywhere, within my family as well, on both sides. But it's a community problem that I see, that we can't keep holding those secrets, because it's the same horse getting beat over and over again. It gets to you, you know, when's it gonna stop? When's it gonna end? The roles of leadership, you know, I never thought that I'd be in this position where I'd be able to, because I thought I was unworthy to be able to tell somebody or talk to somebody about issues that they have, or growing up, or I was unworthy. But like James would always say to me, you know, until you find yourself, then who are you, you know? And like I said, the last 3 years, I've pretty much found myself, and still work in progress. But you know, I think this is very important, that we do continue these conversations with our men, getting them more involved, to where they don't have to run away to a facility to express themselves amongst strangers. And that's what I had to do, is because I think it was more comfortable for me that way, because I know too many people in the community, especially at IHC, or the council members, or counseling and stuff like that. But I think you guys make great points, and I'm glad to be a part of this panel, and I hope we can keep this going, and creating those spaces, you know. So thank you, Keely.
Thank you. Any other comments? We have quite a few questions, but if you guys have any comments? No. So some of the questions that we have, Sarah Frank is asking, have any of you facilitated any domestic violence classes or healing classes in jails or prisons? I think Mike touched on it a little bit. Anyone else?
I used to do mentorship with our juvenile detention facility for my juvenile offenders, and what that was the thing that bothered me the most, because my tribe decided to take money and build a juvenile facility for juvenile offenders, and that bothered me greatly, only because it just says that I'm not gonna help you, we're just gonna lock you away. You know, and so what I kind of asked, you know, the judges of my tribal court was to allow me access to these children, along with other people in the community to go in and mentor them and to kind of introduce different ideas and different aspects of them. Because I think at that age, it can go either way. They can either continue on the path of destruction, or I can introduce them to a couple of other opportunities that they might be able to like. And majority, when you do get to talk to them, it takes a while, because they've grown up in a place where opportunity to speak or to be heard or to voice or to acknowledge the fact that they are a victim is pretty much non-existent. And it's true to what Raina had said and James about the child burning down a village just for the warmth. And that was their reign. So, we do talk about the whole domestic violence, and majority of the time it's very, very regular in the household where these kids grow up. And then the dialogue happens between the children and the juveniles, and some of them said they don't mind being in the juvenile facility because it's the first place that they've had to sleep without being bothered or being raped or being touched or not seeing the domestic violence. It was the first time that they've had a good night's sleep in a long time. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's their safe space, but at the same time, as a community, we should have been able to provide that safe space and do anything we can to prevent. And I've introduced workshops and classes as well as culture in the community, and luckily I do keep in contact with some of my juveniles. Some of them have gone away to college and trade schools, so I'm happy about that. Of course, you do have some not so successful stories, but still keep in contact in hopes that I'll be able to make a phone call and then hear good news about their progress. But I mean, I just wish that as a tribe in the different tribes in the different areas that we could do so much more, and be proactive and not reactive, for our children. So I mean, so that's the part that I have done in my spare time, to kind of help the kids. Culture is a lot of it, because if you introduce them to the culture, a lot of these kids don't know, because again, along with being growing up in an American society, we've lost track of who we are as people, as Indian people. And it's always good to hear, because every child has heard a Bible story, but they've never heard a Bible story from their own people. And I call it a Bible story because it's our creation story, about our God and our way of life and how we came to be. And a lot of our kids don't even know that. They're introduced more to the Christianity version of the Bible before they're introduced to their own culture, and we have to change that. And I feel like a lot of it with cultural identity, for Indian kids, is missing. And you can't say that, a child, cultural identity goes a long way, as well as self-identity, and our kids need both. And I think once we've established that and introduced that, that's a big way in the right direction to heal.
Thanks, Tim. Our next question is how can we address the ongoing demeaning of women by Native men, mainly on social media, including spiritual leaders?
I think when we're talking about social media, unfortunately, it's the wild, wild west. I can post something and be any one of you guys. If I'm adept enough at using the internet and using social media, I can post and say whatever I want, and there's literally no way for anyone to sort of address that or pin it on me. And so I think when we talk about the internet and we talk about social media, we have to be sort of conscious that 95% of it isn't real, and the other 5% I would take with a grain of salt. Because again, I could sit here and if I know what I'm doing on social media, I can be Mike Duncan and saying any kind of crazy thing I want. Or Dean, you know, imagine that, being Dean and being able to go to Twitter and, you know, smash my rivals. And so I think a lot of times when we worry about social media, we're worrying about this la la land that's out there. Now, is it virulent and is it nasty at times? Absolutely. And so again, I would look to our leaders, our parents, our folks who know about these things to address that in some way. But I tend to caution my clients, my people that I work with about social media. It is pretend land. People go there to pretend they're something they're not, or to be something they're not in their normal lives. And so with that comes the exaggerated sort of attacks that you see on folks. And it makes it so that you, as the person being attacked, you don't have a lot of sort of recourse in what can I do? Is it true? Is it not true? Those things really don't matter on the internet. And so I think when we talk to our clients and we talk to people we work with, when we mention social media, we have to understand what it is, the animal it has sort of become in our lives, and you know, kind of address the ways to protect your children, protect yourselves, because it's like that genie out of the bottle. There's no putting it back in. And again, I've seen instances where victims had been abused by a partner and the partner took control of their social media. And so to have that sort of access going on and have the sort of things that can go on where people can, you know, pretend to be someone else or just say, I heard this or I witnessed this. It is, I caution my clients that it's a pretend sort of fairy tale land place where things don't have to be true at all. And so I think that's one of the things we need to talk about when we talk about social media with our clients, with our communities, is it's not real. We get so caught up in Facebook and Twitter and the things that are said and done. And in reality, those things they aren't real. And so they're used oftentimes in very negative ways to impact people in the community, especially I've seen instances where someone was accused of sexual abuse and the community got on Facebook and made it hard for that person to be in the community. So we have to always be aware that, you know, as much as we all love Facebook and that sort of stuff, it really is not true. It's pretend land. And so the damage that it does is real. And that's the thing that we also need to focus on, is even though there isn't a lot of recourse for things that are said that aren't true or that are just plain old fake, as we know, in this current time that we live in, you can go on Twitter and say anything you want, and half the people are going to believe you, half the people aren't. And so I think that's important that we address that when we talk about social media and abuse and victims and perpetrators. Their access, a lot of times for us in domestic violence, our biggest issue with social media is the perpetrator having access, direct access to the victim, being able to influence that victim or being able to continually abuse that victim from a whole other geographic location, and use social media to influence the way that victim's friends list reacts to that friend, to play that victim as someone who is an evil person making up allegations and those sort of things. We see that sort of stuff a lot in the work we do.
See it a lot too, especially with the restraining order process, and as well as the criminal process. So one thing that, you know, we're trying to work on now, because social media has become such a big space for harassment, bullying, victim shaming, whether it be, you know, the other way around about. There's justice and then there's Facebook justice. You have the justice system that actually works in the best interest of the people, and then you have the Facebook justice where it's one-sided, and depending on how many followers you have, people are going to jump on that. You know, and what it comes down to is taking responsibility for your Facebook. You know, and I think. You know, the question was, you know, derogatory and demeaning statements towards women by leaders and people on Facebook of our own people. You know, I think that's something that it comes down to accountability. You know, talk to that council person or that leadership in that leadership role, you know, about, because I think When someone who is a leader and has social media and they post something like that, it one can turn people off, or two, it can just keep perpetuating that cycle. Like, oh well, Timothy said it, so it must be fine. No big deal. It must be funny, So I think that at that moment, we have to say, hey, I didn't find that very, very funny, because there's possible victims that are looking at your social media, and it's kind of like they're making fun of their situation. And I think that we need to start having that dialogue of where everybody has to start calling out everybody on their social medias and take responsibility for it. We do have people who do have, because I think I have several pages. I have my personal, and then I have one with my tribe and a few others. And it's, I clearly set on the other pages that I oversee, the dialogue and the manner of each post and the responsibility of each person posting in the group. And luckily, it's been open and everyone's pretty respectful. But I think I only had to delete one post because it was an accusation and it wasn't. It was a personal opinion accusation, so I had to take it down to protect the person who it was about, as well as the victim, and actually talk with the person that posted it. It's like, I understand how you feel. I understand, I'm not saying that I agree with you or anything, but you also have to look at, the victim. How is it going to impact the victim? It's like you're giving this person attention that, that they, awareness of who the person, is, yes, most definitely, but at the same time, you're creating attention for the victim that they may not be prepared for to handle as a victim, because victims have to go through a healing process, and doing that to acknowledge the perpetrator, you have to acknowledge the victim, and they have to come into that on their own time. That's their healing process, that's their healing journey. So we can't force people into that healing process. So again, with the whole Facebook media, I usually just hold people accountable, especially my leadership in my area. I hold them accountable, and I feel like that's the way that I address it. I don't know how I hope I answered that question.
Thanks, Tim. Anyone else comment on that? We have a question about how do you, your programs, or maybe some of you guys do this already, feel about making public announcements at all the community gatherings, such as softball tournaments, intertribal sports, other gatherings, where we have mass gatherings for all tribes, constantly spreading the message and making healthy relationships normal again. Is that something that any of you guys do, or how do you feel about doing something like that?
I want to respond to that question, Keely, but I want to be clear, kind of like what you're asking, because are you saying, like, say we have an annual gathering, or, a lot of times, I mean, in the normal sense, right? Other than 2020 COVID, right? When we gather, are you talking about any gatherings such as one of our traditional gatherings or whatever, that we speak directly about, the issue around DV and violence against women? Or are you talking about how do we, convey this message to, our community members? Because, for us, I think, what we try to do is, like, right when we initiate it, when we're opening up, when we gather people, we let them know why we're here, right? And what our intentions are, and how we're going to conduct ourselves, right? How we're going to have respect for each person. That's one thing, but I want, like I said, I want to be clear. If you're asking, do we take the time to actually be specific and say, we need to discuss and, make this a priority and speak about, the issue around, violence against our women?
I think I think it's asking a little bit of both. That this is from one of our viewers, so I think it's like if there's a softball tournament, you know, can you announce that, you know, oh, we're going to have a men's gathering, or, you know, or men's circle, or we have support groups, or whatever, you know, services are out there for our community, but also talking about the issue.
Yeah, you know, what we've done in the past and too, and I think Mike can speak to this too, you know, with the annual you know, event that's been going on that Mike created, you know, with the softball tournament, the Unity softball tournament in Sacramento. But, you know, what we've done here too at Yakima is have those, you know, share about, you know, the other important gatherings around wellness and around prevention and about addressing these issues. So yeah, we want to take that opportunity, you know, if we have a large number of our community together, to inform them and encourage them to be a part of this very important dialogue, you know. So that's what we do.
Oh, sorry, Dean.
Go ahead.
We have a softball. We do a softball tournament. This would have been our 13th year. Sacramento Native Unity softball tournament. We invite all the local agencies to come and be part of that tournament here in Sacramento. And part of that, we do a free lunch at the middle of the tournament. And so, meaning like our fatherhood group that we have, our men's group, we do the barbecuing, and then we pass out, it's, you know, free food for the community. Well, in that time, you know, we start that about 11:30 or so. I've been integrated a wellness speaker at lunch. So it's really a choice. People want to sit around, have their lunch on there because there's a hill, and then so we'll have one of our microphone. We'll have a wellness speaker. Sometimes it's an elder. Somebody's just sharing about their story of recovery. Somebody is sharing about, you know, their journey, you know, of just recovery in general, of wellness, and it's become normal. So people, like I said, you know, usually those events are, you know, or softball tournaments or fast pitch tournaments. You know, that we know that there's alcohol there and there's, you know, certain behaviors there, but, you know, it's an alcohol-free event, and then we share that message as well as far as trying to be clean and sober, or again, DV or DV prevention or anything like that. We have, and so that's been our norm. And the people that'll stay for it, a lot of people will stay for it, some people won't, and that's fine. But we're making that our norm at our event, at our tournament. That, you know, this is wellness as well. Anytime you get Indians together, you got to speak a message. That's what I feel, and so that's been something we've been practicing for a long time.
I think like with our own events, it's always talked about. If it's not our event, like for our program or whatever, it's getting in contact with those people, like maybe the person who's going to offer up the prayer, and talk to them about, can you make sure that you express, you know, about you know, treating each other as good relatives, and, you know, that how certain things aren't our way, and that we praying for those things not to be within that space. And then talking to whoever's like at a softball tournament, whoever your announcer is, you know, there's always time in between games that they can talk about certain things. And, you know, it doesn't always have to be domestic violence is not our way, you know, abuse of our relatives is not it's little things, like I spoke about earlier, you know, just acknowledging a program, you know, acknowledging somebody who's done something, changed their lives, you know. And those, you know, you have somebody who keeps the grounds, who used to be an alcoholic, but, you know, they change, making those little announcements like that, I think, are acknowledging those little things. Maybe the program's sponsored in some way with a trophy, and it's just a way to get it out there, like, you know, about the program and the work. But, you know, it doesn't have to be so prominent. It could be little things along the way that, you know, it just gets in that mindset of how you talk about it. You know, it doesn't always have to be so deep. I don't think it's an issue myself, making announcements or doing things at events. If they're not our events, you know, that still needs to be made aware. So.
Yeah, and I know, like, some of the like Paula Res Radio, they do some announcements every now and then. I think it's Eric Ortega who runs it. He's a pretty good MC who does a lot of the announcements and stuff. And then I know some of the ball tournaments, they have acknowledged some things, but it's not as often as it should be. But it's a good idea to have that there.
I think for every event that I've hosted or been asked to host, I think it's always fair to kind of brag about the tribe and the programs that it has to offer, not just giving a shout out to the sponsor, which is usually the casinos or the smoke shops, but it's always good to shout out the other programs such as like the health services and the behavior health, and because it lets the people know that not only to be proud of the casino and their enterprises, but to also be proud of the other programs that they have in the community. And I think that's what we would start doing too. And you could always do it like on your social media as well. Because I always brag about my tribe and the services that it provided for me, because it helped create this man that's sitting here before you today. And if it wasn't for those services, oh wow, I don't know where I would be, but I always give a shout out to behavior health and she's my homegirl, Dr. Lucy, for helping me, find healing for myself, so I always brag about my tribe and the services that it has to offer, and usually do that on the daily, only because without those services, I use myself for an example, so yeah. I think that all tribes should actually do that, especially in the casinos, where you have the biggest audience, such as like gambling addiction, to alcoholism, to drug abuse, to prostitution. I think we should kind of like mandate our casinos to post different services that they have to besides the whole Gambleholics Anonymous hotline that they usually put out there. But yeah, I think that's something that we should probably work upon as well. It's just my insight.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you guys still good on time? We have a couple more questions that I wanted to ask, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So we are a little bit past our time frame.
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. Okay. Well, the other question was, we have a guest here that works with adults in custody. So they're asking that they usually don't know what adults in custody are incarcerated for unless they tell them. I want to keep looking at the equal and not at their crime. How important is it to know their crime when working with inmates?
So I think it's very important. When you're talking about equality, and as your clinician, I need to know what you've done. I need to know the decisions you've made. And so I think when you're working with that population, it's important that they be honest with you, because that's how the abuse happens: half-truths, omitting information on situations. And so when you're working with certain clients, it's important that they explain what happened. Tell me why we are here. Why are you here? What led to this? And then I think it's important that you, as the clinician, and again, I'm coming from a social worker lens, clinical social work. It's important for me to do my research, independent of what my client is telling me. And so that way I can address all the issues that are going on with the client, and not just the ones that the client feels needs to be addressed, or the ones that the client feels comfortable talking to me about.
Thank you, Rain. Anyone else want to comment? No. Rain, can you share your quotes about the village one more time? We have them. Everybody wants to write that down one more time.
So it's not my quote. I think I
know.
got it from it's either an old Indian or African proverb book, and it says that the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And in the work that we do, I feel like we see those sort of children a lot. We see those children that would actively burn our village because of how they've been treated, how they haven't been embraced, how they have been sort of pushed aside, how they have been abused. And so those are always the children or the people in my mind that need the most support, because the community has sometimes turned on them. I've worked with children who, accuse very powerful members of their tribe of sexual misconduct or abuse. And the way the community at large treats that child, I would pause to have any adult go through the treatment they got from the surrounding community. How dare you? How dare you, say this about this person? How dare you, muddy their name? Irregardless of whether they're an abuser or not, why are you even bringing it up? Why are you talking about it? So I think that those are the children that really need our help. They need our support. And we see this a lot, unfortunately, with and I want to say to Timothy, I appreciate your honesty around coming out and what that was like for you, because we see so many of our children who go through that sort of thought process. Is it safe for me? Is it okay for me to have these conversations? The idea that he wouldn't feel safe being around other men to talk about some of these things. Where does someone like that go? Who do they seek out for that direction, for that support? And so I think we always have to know what we're dealing with as clinicians, substance abuse disorder, clinicians. When you're talking to our clients about the things that they have done in the darkness of night and in those, times when they don't think anyone is looking, again, that is where the growth is going to happen. That is where you're going to get the honesty. That is where they're going to really do some work. When you know those secrets, it's hard for them to not address it, not to approach it, not to have it right there. And it's hard for the client to, sort of push back when you know exactly what they've done. You've seen it. You've seen the reports. You've seen the records. You've seen the arrest reports. You've seen the arrest records. You've seen how many times child welfare had actually been to their house. It's hard to, rationalize that as a client when you know that I know all this. When CPS has been to your house 25 times in the past 2 years, police have made 17 calls for service. You can't tell me that everything's okay in your house and that everything is normal, because those aren't normal sort of patterns of behavior or interaction.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rain. And someone did mention that it was an African proverb that you were quoting there. The next question is it's really towards for Mike, but I think probably all of you could also answer it. It's asking that, or it's saying that self-awareness is the greatest agent of change. What was the pivotal moment for you? And I think they were referring back to when you were talking about that you were an ex-abuser.
I'll be honest, what really happened for me was my children. And I had started having daughters. And someone mentioned to me, your daughter's gonna marry somebody just like you. I said, oh crap. And so I wanted to make some changes. But I was already on this path of wellness already. I was already on this path of wellness. And I was part of my healing on a red road, recovery. It was part of just learning how to be teachable. I was learning how to be teachable and understanding that my thought process or my belief system wasn't a good one. And that what I was operating under was a very harmful, not only to myself, but to the people around me, that I was this way, now I'm passing this forward to my children. And so, going forward, like these are some exercises that we do inside in my groups is, again, like, what are we passing for? What do we learn from the past? And this is one thing, it helped me learn that even though I had to take responsibility for my actions, not all of it was my fault. This is something I was taught. This is something that was shown. This is something that was. This is the only thing. If I was the only thing I know, the only thing I was shown, of course, it's the only thing I'm going to believe to be right. And that's so that kind of helped me with the self-forgiveness part. You know, working with people. And men, that's the part of we really get to the place of like self-forgiveness. If you've done these things, it's okay to say these things, and to at least to yourself, and say, these are the things so I can move forward. Every man is different, every person is different. I get that, but it's important. Like I said, it's important to get to that place of self-forgiveness and understand. And I think that's why I think education is so important. So if we go into our communities and we share education, like I said, I was unaware what abuse was, right? Like I was proud to say, like, I never physically hit nobody. I'm not an abuser. But I had no idea what verbal abuse was. I had no idea what emotional abuse. I had no idea. I mean, even like my sponsor was at the time was telling me, he goes, I mean, I had a lot of issues, about with my kid's mother about getting them involved with CPS, and I was all on her, like angry at her because she couldn't. And then he asked me this question. He goes, "Where were you at when all this was happening?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Where were you at when she was getting in trouble and kids got taken? Where were you?" I go, "I was in jail." He goes, "Do you know abandonment is a part of abuse?" And it was the first time that I was like, my mind just exploded. Going, "Oh crap, I have a part in this." And so, what I mean by that is saying that when we start to really truly educate men, or just our people in general, about what abuse is, it'll help us understand that we're part of the problem. We are part of the problem. We could be not only totally this is not just one thing is the problem. There's just all these other things that are connected. Now we see the abuse inside our tribal councils. We see sometimes even with our elders, sometimes can be this way. We can see sometimes women can be this way as a part of abusers because the way that the way they talk to their children, or even sometimes they're men. It's sometimes those little things are swept under the rug because again we don't think those things are abuse. But we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot in the last 20 years with data and understanding what abuse is. We've learned a lot. So going forward, education is so important. And so I think that's something that I take pride in. Is like when we go in, I'm not trying to tell you men what to do, but I'm gonna tell you what abuse is. I'm gonna educate you what abuse is, and you have to make those choices and decisions. Is that what you want to be? Is that what you want for your family, or for your child, or your wife, or your son, or your daughter to have in this going forward? And then you replace it with something healthy. I mean, those are the solutions. We stay in the solution always, but I think education is a big one. I think a part of that is again men wanting to listen and paying attention. So I try to do it in the most because men can be very sensitive. You know what I mean? And I think that becomes from single parent homes. You know what I mean? Where no man's going to tell me what to do. They get all sensitive and all like, and that's something we have to work on as men, not being so sensitive. That comes from a woman raising a young boy and not having that male figure in their life. That we have to be more open-minded to be able to take teachings from men and saying what is our male role as far as and just as far as again as respect, out of love, out of forgiveness, out of kindness, out of goodness, and also to learning how to self-evaluate ourselves and knowing right from wrong, because we do all know for right from wrong, but we're misguided a lot of times. No one's holding us accountable. We're not being responsible. And so education, I think, is important. And that's just a human thing. That has nothing to do with specific race, but I think, or specific gender, I think it has to do with that part of our role as Indian people.
Thank you. So I'm going to unmute the audience now. If you have noise or if you're not speaking, I just ask that you keep your phone or your computer muted. And I'll give anyone a chance to ask a question of the panelists that we have not asked already. And I think I unmuted everyone. I hope I did. It's not looking. Does anyone have any questions? If not, you can also type it in. I'm not sure if my thing is working here. Yeah. Anybody want to ask a question?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question. Can you hear me?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. My name is Bradley. I'm new to my my tribal council here, and I was just wondering what kind of advice you guys would give to, and what actions you would want your council to take to address these issues that you guys are bringing up here.
Who wants to tackle that one? Dean, I think you have to unmute yourself.
How's that? Can you guys hear me?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, open up my mouth. Yeah, I appreciate that question. And, you know, my response is always about, you know, when I'm speaking to our tribal leadership, the council, is, you know, for the council really to take the approach that, you know, every decision we make, you know, and how we, you know, approach, you know, challenges in our community for our tribal members, how do we improve, you know, again, things that will promote overall health and well-being, safety, you know, for families. But I always want to encourage tribal councils to take the approach that this is what's going to benefit us, not like, you know, what will it cost us, but this is what will benefit us. Okay, and we're willing to invest in what is going to help our people become, you know, healthier, and whether it's, you know, within their homes, you know, whether it's in, you know, the schools, whether it's in, you know, the different learning programs that could be available. You know, some of us shared a little bit about those, you know, whether it's motherhood and sacred curriculum, you know, white bison, red road, whatever it is, you know, really look at, you know, those ways, you know, the approach to be an investment, and that's going to benefit the future generations. That's why we do the work that we do. So I'll encourage the leadership to take that approach.
Anyone else want to add a comment? Jimmy, I think you might have to here, I'll unmute you, I think.
There you go. I kept saying that you muted me. I think with tribal council, like back when we first started, it was just acknowledging that there was a problem. And you know, that was a hard thing to do back then because our community wasn't even acknowledging. You know, they didn't acknowledge that it was we came across no, we don't have that problem here. There's no domestic violence here. And you know, so it was a resolution that was passed by tribal council first. And the resolution was stating that, you know, that domestic violence isn't our way. It's not part of our culture. It's not part of our tradition. And recognizing that we take a stand against it as a tribal council. And we had one of our tribal citizens wrote a grant and, you know, got funding, and that's how it all started. But it was just acknowledging in the beginning, and you know, like I said, through resolution, and then that was later taken to the general membership. And you know, there was some pushback, but you know, you gotta, as a council member, you know, you're an elected official, and sometimes you got to take that stand, and you know, your people may not fully agree, but you know, through education and everything, people will come around.
Keely, can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I think what's important too is that any one of the council members, if they can actually show up, if they can be present, you know, that right there, just like when we had the men's panel down at Pechanga last year, when those tribal leaders showed up in that space, in that circle, that was powerful. So we need to see more of that from our tribal leaders. They can say, yeah, we're invested in this. We're going to pass this resolution to address this, but yet let's be a part of it. Let's show our people. You know. Anyway, that's my plea.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dean. That's exactly what I was just about to say, that we just need that presence of our council members that we appoint up there to be behind us or right next to us to help this movement move forward together as a people, not just as council members. You know, you're elected for a reason, and we need you there beside us, not behind us, but beside us to move forward. Totally took the words out of my mouth, Dean. Thank you.
We had another really good question. So this will be the final question, I think, for the recording. It said, in our community, we have many men who were sexually abused as kids, and these men are now fathers, and I'm seeing lots of issues arising from the past trauma. Are there any tips or advice you can provide to assist these men and their families?
You know, Keely, I think that kind of what I shared, you know, kind of like at the beginning about, you know, doing that work, you know, the healing the inner child, you know, where, you know, these men, you know, how do they overcome that trauma, you know, and again, maybe even, you know, the belief that, you know, how do they see themselves, you know, do they even, you know, am I worthy, you know, am I anything other than, you know, what was done to me? You know, children, you know, we've seen that children tend to blame themselves, even when they're victimized, you know, and like Rain earlier, you know, shared the statistics as far as those young boys that were victimized, how they become, you know, the perpetrators, you know. So what that shows me is, and again, and then this question that you're asking is, there's still work to be done. And so, you know, we do that in a number of different ways, and healing the inner child is one. But again, there's a lot of, you know, I mean, there's layers of work that needs to be done. The whole mental, you know, emotional, how they feel about themselves, how they see themselves. You know, how do we again create that space? And it takes a lot of work, you know, but it's worth it, and it is possible. It is possible. So we've done some great work, you know, with our brother Martin Martinez with that, you know, in those circles, you know, with the men specific that have been victims of sexual abuse and trauma.
Thank you. Anyone else?
And I think there's also, yeah, I think there has to be money invested into that. You know, a lot of times, and I know in the rural reservations, there is a lack of resources. You know what I mean? And they might have one substance abuse counselor and one therapist. And there's this, you know what I mean? And then they're non-native, you know what I mean? So they don't really have the background to kind of identify or work with, you know, they're treating it with, you know, like I said, different modality. And so there's always this mistrust, you know, involved. And so I think one of the things is, you know, again, money to be invested into, you know, our communities, really making an effort to say we're trying to address sexual assault or sexual abuse as children or adult children that were sexually assaulted as a young child, and then really invest money into that, get the right resources, and really develop that safe place. I mean, make it a point to make the safe place, because I'm telling you, every community I've been to has sexual abuse involved. I mean, even child molestation. It's so normal that it's not, and I'm saying it's not talked about at all. And a lot of times the abusers are and then also again prevention as well. And so those money, like it has to take money to get the right people in there, to even get to the people that want to do that work, to get them educated, to invest inside their community, child members. And so it's just not one person's responsibility. It's a lot of work to do, and there's not that many of us. You know what I mean? There's not that many of us, you know what I mean? Especially that's why I'm happy because see this many men, you know, stepping forward saying this is it gives us hope. Because I remember, like I said, there's a lot of times you do this work and they'll have something and you'll see maybe 5 men and 20 women doing the work. We need more men doing this work, you know? And so investing in saying this is what something is a tribe or in the agency saying we want to educate, we want to give you guys the trainings, we want to give you the education, we want to support you. You know, there's actually you can make a living at it because you know, all of us have to make a living, and that it's not going to be just pennies and you know, people that can barely make it by, you know. And so it takes time, investment that people really want this to end in our communities.
Yeah. Thank you. So really quickly, do you guys have any events or anything that you want to just share really quickly before we end the recording? Anything coming up in your communities that you guys want to share? I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to kind of plug your programs a little bit. Oh, Tim has something. You unmuted, Tim?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I believe it is the 8th of September, we'll be doing a teen tech safety for online tech webinar with, I can't remember it, Adam Dodge is his name. There'll be 2 sessions, one in the morning at 10 a.m. for the parents, friends, and anyone that has youth in their house that use technology. The afternoon session is geared more towards the teens on online safety and kind of going over like cyberbullying, how to identify and stuff like that, with cyberbullying and stuff that's going on online right now with our youth. And I believe that one's at 1 p.m. Same day, I believe it's September 8th. I could send out the information through email if you'd like. Just let us know. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah. So this has been something that's been work in progress since our last men's conference that we had with the foundation that I work with, which is the 7G Foundation with Benet Collect. Our 7G Foundation is actually going to be starting a Native Men's mentorship program for the Southern California area. And we have a couple of people signed on already for this mentorship program. And that would be Chairman Isaiah Vivanco of Sabova, Richie Lopez of Torres Martinez, who's a council member, Stevie Lopez, Ray Nelson, who is from the La Jolla area, and Chairman John Crystal of Viejas. So, and we're still trying to get more representation from the Northern California tribes, so we can keep that diverse. So that's going to be happening in the works for the 7G Foundation, coming up here pretty soon.
Great.
And we're doing two different things. Every Tuesday night for till the end of September, we're doing on our page and on Facebook Live, Native Dads Network. We already started. We're in the third week now. Oh, we're going on the 4th week now. We had Al Pooley, the founder of Native American Fathers and Family Association. We had Don Coyas on. We had Michael Link later last night. So every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock on Native Dads Network page, we're having that. And then on our Fatherhood is Sacred Sacramento page, I'm just really doing the class on Facebook Live. You know what I mean? Every Thursday night at 5 p.m. Did I say 5 a.m.? 5 p.m. 5 p.m. 6 is an hour. So each one. So Tuesday nights at 6 to 7, and then Thursday nights 5 to 6. So we're doing Facebook Live, 2 different things. And this week we're having another good topics. We're actually talking about culture and the importance of culture and spirituality, and with healing, and with a couple good brothers of mine up here and from this area, Cliff Moda and Kyle Bill. So they're local boys, and we're gonna have that conversation on Facebook Live. So you guys check that out. That'll be good to see some more faces on there. And we have a pretty large audience. So, but it's always good to have more to push the message out of healing and wellness.
Great, great.
For our program, we right now we have our weekly group sessions. We've transitioned to doing them over Zoom. So if any of our community is interested, they just got to call us at the office, Bellic office, and we can give them the link to join up. And then we're in the process now of doing stuff similar to this. Sitting down and doing some recording and making some like PSAs, I guess. And then having just some conversations with our staff and recording those, and I'm going to be making them available online for continue the work. And during these times of COVID, letting people know that we're still here, we're still out here, and still available.
Oh. Yeah, for our program, what we're doing is we have currently the Tribal Youth Cultural Wellness Series, and that's weekly. And I think we're going into like our 18th week or something like that, with these sessions, Mondays and Fridays. And, the idea was to provide space, this virtual space, right, for our tribal youth, for them to, strengthen those connections, and so we have been having guest speakers such as Mike and other California natives, and talking about, how culture plays a role in, the work that we do. And also, when we don't have guest speakers, what we do is we'll cover different topics, and like Timothy shared, and good reminder about, doing that, cyberbullying, as one topic, healthy relationships, and so, just kind of go down the line, the list of, what can we provide to our youth that will be helpful for them, and really just to let them, again, have this time to, know they're not alone, that they're a part of a, larger community, and they look forward to it. We have a few of them in place, and so that's ongoing. And then we're planning, actually we're going to have a virtual GONA for our community at the end of next month in September 22nd through the 25th, 4-day virtual GONA. And myself and Brother Albert Tipman will be facilitating that for our community. And it's going to be a family GONA. So we're looking forward to that, and just trying to provide, some space, that promotes, wellness, and healing for community. And I know that this is kind of like, how we're moving forward, in this virtual way. And so we're thinking of other ways, that we can connect, like cultural specific teachings, like around regalia, and items like that, that could be powerful. Collecting medicine too, have a session around collecting medicine, and so we're happy to, to continue with those, to have those opportunities.
Great. Thank you all for sharing, and thank you, brothers, for being a part of this conversation. I'm honored that you all joined us, and we will continue this conversation, and we have plans to continue to do similar conversations in the near future. So I hope you will join us again. And thank you to the audience. We are going to stop the recording. I know some of the speakers may have to jump off, but we'll be hanging around if anyone has questions or comments after